distinguished members of the audience, distinguished friends, distinguished youngsters, since the morning, you've been seeing older group of people, except for a few people. Please excuse us. We were given a duty to make presentation. I'm neither a scientist nor an academic specialist, but I have this de facto presence in what the colleagues have been doing, so I was asked to make a speech on right to the city. So during my speech, I will talk about it. I'm so honored to be a part of this series of symposia called MARUF. I would like to thank all the colleagues for working so hard to make this organization possible. So there are two concepts, urban and rights, cities and rights. So let me touch upon them very shortly. So my approach is a right-based approach. Since the morning, we have been talking about rights, and these rights are very much related with each other, and maybe we would repeat ourselves as well. So how do we describe right? So this is a condition that one can ask for, that one can use. So the justification is due to some needs. It can come as a wish or a longing, but over the course of time, over a process, this feeling becomes demanding the right. And French philosopher Henri Lefebvre is going to be my inspiration. And urban right is referring to what it is, as the philosopher is well mentioned. When it comes to cities, for centuries, human beings have two approaches. I'm, of course, simplifying all those approaches. Please excuse me for doing that. There are city lovers and anti-urban people or enemies of cities. They believe that all the evil things are emanating from cities. There's a different group which think that the beautification of our life and enrichment of our life is thanks to the cities. What does it mean to think on cities? And Professor Lefebvre said that thinking about cities, meaning that you have to handle the conflicting aspects of it, and one has to take this into consideration. What are these? Limitations, possibilities, peaceful times, war times, violence times, assemblies, being lonely, implicit, explicit. These are the dualities that he thinks that it is appropriate to think. So how do we come up with this concept of urban, city right? A French philosopher from the 20th century, Henri Lefebvre, described it first back in 1967 in his column. This is what he said. And back in 1968, Le droit à la ville. This was the title of the book. And until his death in 1991, in all of his works and in all of his books, this is what he made reference. Who is this person called Lefebvre, this French writer? I will get back to the rights in a few minutes, but I would like to talk about him. I wrote a book on le faire, humbly. So a publishing house wanted me to prepare this book in brackets. A person made an assessment on him. He does not speak French, and he wrote me a letter saying that we are publishing scientific books. Can you write us a book? So I'm sorry to say that, but I worked my butt off to put all these things together because I worked so much. I'm sure that there are valuable specialists who worked in this. So who is Harry Lefebvre? I wanted to understand how he describes himself. According to him, he describes himself as follows. He thinks that he's a thinker. With the criticisms, one has to give disturbance to what is present. And he says that the masses and the individuals' spontaneity should not be neglected. This is not what academia can do, and theory and practice is very well merged by le faire. And this is what he says in his book on cities. He says that I don't accept anything absolute. I do not give up on, I'm not going to stop having a freedom of thought. He is excluded, he's deported from his own party, by the way. And he says, critical distance is a fundamental thing for me. That's what he says. In this society, one should not be intrigued by the criticisms, or you should not be trapped by it. So one has to live accordingly by avoiding the traps. I think this is what we fundamentally need as a principle in our country. And this is how he describes himself. So we have very young members of the audience, and let me say one thing which they would like. If I were in their shoes, I would like it so much. I would have liked it so much. A question is asked to him. What does it mean to philosophically think? It means thinking about it in its entirety of life, entirety of thought. This is what we think excessively. Actually, this is what our professors do, but it's a very nice reference quotation, and I will stop after that. A question about love and women was asked to him. By the way, when this question was asked to him, he was at the age of 90. So he marries at the age of 85. So he was like a young stallion at the age of 90. Love and women have a great impact. I took 3 realities in seriously. 1, love. 2, philosophy. 3, political struggle. But he says that I'm not a politician, which la politique and le politique is very different in French. One is confused with the other in Turkish language. La politique and le politique are different. He said a few words on democracy, and he proceeds with a different title. He says the following about democracy. In the ancient Greek, democracy is born together with the city. The citoyen, as the word, is emanating from city, which means citizen. Struggle for democracy means that there's a struggle for urban democracy. This is what he said in the midst of 1950s. But here today in 2023, we're still discussing about this issue, which is a very significant predecessor. Representative democracy does not have is not sympathetically welcomed by him, just like me. Representative democracy is not achieved with the direct democracy And it dangles between the representative democracy and authoritarian democracy. This is what he says. This is what we recently see in the world. He was quite visionary in predicting the presence of this dangling. So what kind of a life did he have? He was born in 1901. His mother was originally from Basque and quite a Catholic mother. And his father did not show any interest in any of these issues. So whatever he does, his father does not reject or object it, and his mother wants him to go to the seminary. And at the age of 14, he studies books on Saint Augustine, and his mother thinks that her son was going to become a man of faith, and he writes some books on Spinoza. And he says to his mother that if you want me to be a person like this, this is what I'm going to be, as he was reading Nietzsche. So when he came to Paris back in 1920s, back in those days, Paris was the center of art and politics. He meets Picasso, surrealists, artists, Breton, etc. They were in exile back in those days in Paris. So he takes part in those currents as well. But he does not become a member to any of these segments. He has a critical viewpoint on the political parties. He says that maybe I'm wrong. I don't take absolute things as definitive ones. So what is the basics of his thoughts? So what's the source? What's the birth of urban rights according to him? Let me summarize. So philosophical thinking and judgmental thinking are not separated from each other by the Great Chinese Wall. Thinking about impossibilities would make us richer and richer. We can have a larger horizon. Non-open-ended and solid, stiff thinking structures are those structures that I am against, he said. And some historical concepts are modernized by him. He affiliates new meanings to art, literature, and he builds a huge, strong linkage in between his thinking way, and he is against deterministic approaches. Constantly liberating designs are the things that he was seeking for. And what does he say about the urban rights? Let us see what he says about the urban rights. In general, this is what's been done in the world. So the British and the American, and including David Harvey, Peter Marcus, this is what they've been doing. So they have taken the following as a principle. In La Droit à la Ville, the book titled La Droit à la Ville, published in '68, was taken as a basis, and it was translated into English by a female professor from Oxford back in 1996, and she made huge mistakes. And the master says that as of 65, by the way, I have screened and scanned all the things he said as of 65, and I have read lots of books on him. So there are some comparative books, both in Turkish and in French, so you can cross-check. He says that urban right is a call for myself. and it displays itself as a call. So that female professor translated it as, this sentence as, this call, in French, appel. Demand is, exigences was translated as demand. It was translated as call, a cry. It was translated as, not as a call, but as a cry. In America, Peter Marcus was translated as a cry, like yelling. But all of them are bilingual people, but despite this fact, they have made these translation mistakes. A publishing house in Turkey, I'm not going to mention the name, have made huge mistakes in Turkish, and they translated la droit à la ville as the urban law. Droit means right, and the law in Turkish, it's totally the other way around. So this is how they had translated in Turkish. So while reading the Turkish translation, please pay attention to that. This is a remark for the young readers. Urban right is not about right to visit. It is a transformed, it is a renewed urban life. This is how it can reformulate itself. We cannot confine ourselves with the existing ones. And in another book of his, the urban right displays itself as a supreme right. In the morning session, one professor talked about indirect rights, but this is how he describes the urban rights. I do not, by the way, agree with the previous professor. He says that it's a kind of right to freedom, as the professor said. It is a kind of a right, like a right to settlement. There's a huge difference in that sense as well. And he says that this right cannot only be exercised at the central level, but also at the decentral level. He is referring to the developed centers. They should have the right to exercise those rights. This is not a natural right, he says. In the most positive sense, this right should be there to ensure the communication, interaction across all the groups in such a way to display themselves. He's referring to the public area, by the way, but I'm not going to go into the details of it.
And this also includes the right to convene and meet. So the right to the city is expanded then, including political aspects. And humbly, I mean, if I need to mention whether it also includes different rights, like rights of circulation or right to travel. So who else assigns this kind of a courage to choose or discriminate about this? Will include, and this will not include. Of course, right to the city also includes being different, because we are not the same. And benefiting from all this, and if you allow me, I'd like to also comment on that, about Lefebvre's right to the city. I would like to make a different definitions, and most probably I may be mistaken, but here is how I see it. Oppressionist, alienating, unjust, and unsustainable, dominant right order is confronted with this call for resistance, with this right to stasis. It includes several different aspects, several different holistic and based on paradigms and sustainable, and it's a new demand for a sustainable city, and that's the type of demand. There will be a call for coming back, returning, and it can also, you call it a resilience too, and it's also a right to a new order. So where are we right now? I mentioned about the texts and the right to the city. Following the master Lefebvre, there are other philosophers who talked about this issue, include Herbert Marcus's son, Peter Marcus, Mark Purcell, Shelley Buckingham. Especially, the right to the city has been also tackled as a public right to feminists, and İlhan Tekeli had covered these issues. And with their participation, this has been discussed following 1990s. Would you like me to go into detail what they have covered, or can I give you some examples about the right to the city? Yes, my Professor Rushan Keleş already had mentioned in the morning, Yonna Kuchuradi have covered those issues, so there's no need to cover them. Of course, they're all mentioned in the book, and there's no need, as it is mentioned here and there, and here's how I have decided to cover it. So there are also other documents in the global scale. There are many other different documents. There are also documents in the regional level from Europe, from Latin America. There are national documents like the Brazilian city status. And of course, according to the Brazilian constitution, there had been an addendum, which is the city to the right to the city, and it has been added. There is also Montreal city law, are some of the examples. And you can also see the details. And it's also covered in the book. And if you are interested, I can also share some of the references. I don't want to spend too much of your time, but I would like to also leave the floor to your questions. I don't know how much time I have. Do you have any kind of 5 minutes? So almost done. Okay. And in Turkey, there's another path, and the journey of this subject in Turkey has been so there is no subject that has been discussed in Turkey called the right to the city, but since in 1991 there have been several different studies in Yula, and we have other studies, and we also have habitat meetings, and we have several different discussions, and only a few of them have been subject to the 2004 law of municipalities. But in our law of municipalities in 1930, so we have this article 13 about the urban law, and we have also included it in the 2014 laws. So that's where you couldn't find it in the previous ones. If you would like me to read it, I will read it. So it's in the law, but it's a different subject whether it's implemented or not. And of course, as it's underlined by my professors, according to the Constitution's Article 2, the social legal government includes the subject as well, because you don't need to specify it in detail. So the constitutional legal framework also covers that. It covers this right to the city, and that's what I think. And I believe I'm ready to defend my thoughts. So we're going to finish the journey of this right in Turkey. So you may also ask me, what's the problem with me? Because I'm interested in that. So, you know, you can always talk about. So there is no first words and there are no last words. You can talk about it. But we all know that the world is going through a major crisis in this context, both because the owners of the world order, they also accept that fact, and people like us also accept that fact, and there's this face of that, part of that issue. But there are other opinions about how to tackle it, how to struggle it, and how to struggle against it, and how we can sort it out. And I have a humble suggestion. Don't laugh about it. I may have also different ideas. In the previous MARUF 2021, I have shared it with some of my foreign colleagues. And that can be defined as liberating democracy. Yes, of course. We can just implement liberating democracy in our cities and in our countries. Humanity will be living a better life, so the urban rights will be experienced better. So what does that mean, liberating democracy? So I can just make a very brief definition. In my opinion, liberating democracy is a way of existence. So some may be angry with me. So it means that all living creatures, all living systems, way of coexistence, and it's meaningful, and it's way of life, and it's an open system, and it's based on common rights. It's an open-ended and it's an unfinished process. It's not like a manifest that has been defined. So I believe that we have to refrain away from these kind of closed ends. So it starts with the local, to the regional, to the national, and to the world of the universe, and it's a self-management system. So if we can establish the system that I propose, I believe that it will be a very nice task. I believe that my young people in the room who are looking at me with their beautiful eyes will just make it happen, and we are going away from where we started. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have a couple of questions, I would be more than happy to answer them if I have the time.